G'day guys, the video here is about a custom built chassis that I've been working on. I started late December or early January, and here it is June, middle of the year, and the project's not finished. I've had some parts delays, and I've made some changes to the original ideas I had, and but most of the work's done now. Most of the major work's done. It's been run and tested, and this video is just going to show you what idea I had and how I went through realising that. To set the picture, I've got a couple of images here of previous 4x4 custom built chassis I've done. On the left is my F100 6x6. It's an axial SCX10.2 based vehicle, and a little bit further advanced than what you see in this older image, but it's basically done now, really. On the right's my Commanche MJ 6x6, so did the custom body on that and the chassis, and it's today that's way more advanced than what you see there, but sets the picture for the current build I'm toward the end of completion. Just a quicker look. This is my F100 6x6 again, and this image has some relevance to a number of considerations I had later on in the current build progress. Here the Commanche MJ, as you see, is further advanced than what the previous image was, but just to give you a bit of a look at those. So this next build was going to be another 6x6 chassis, and I purchased a set of axles, and I purchased the third axle. Now the F100 of mine uses TRX 6x6 axles, and the centre axle in that is a pass-through style axle, to say that a drive shaft feeds power into that centre axle via a pinion in the front of the axle housing, and there's a pinion at the rear of the axle housing which delivers via a drive shaft power to the rear axle. No, if that makes sense. I bought a clone axial SCX10.2 extension kit, and I bought a transfer case, and this is to eliminate the need for a pass-through centre axle, and to enable me to transfer power to the rear axle bypassing the centre axle. I bought enough shock absorbers, and I ordered a couple of bags of these rod ends. I have stainless steel all-thread rod that I use to make my own link rods. I use these rod ends, and I also sleeve over the threaded rod using aluminium tube or carbon fibre tube. I bought drive shafts, not just the two here. I bought enough. I bought 6 wheels, and I bought 6 tyres. And I already had a pair of chassis rails from somewhere back. So when all the parts arrive and they're all together here, I've got enough at least to start building. You see here a front axle, and here are 2 rear axles, 2 transfer cases here, the forward mount transmission, drive shafts, battery tray there, the 2 chassis rails, the chassis extension kit, 1 and 2 center plates, front and rear chassis cross members come bumper mounts. And here we have some metal shock towers, and here we have some aluminium ones. I'll explain that in a minute. So to zoom in on this a little bit more, when I ordered the SCX10.2 chassis extension kit, it comes with metal shock towers, and I already had in the same order purchased these aluminium shock towers here. And I got these through my favourite AliExpress store, the guys at Famonda. And I want to really give them a bit of a shout out, because they used their brain. They realised in me ordering these shock towers down here in the foreground and the chassis extension kit here in the rear that I didn't have matching shock towers. So they threw in a set of metal shock towers here to match the ones that come with a chassis extension kit, and I thought that was very generous. So in effect, they gave me a set of these. This is an Intergy part, and we'll see it put together and assembled and in place in a couple of images, but I'll just show you that. It's out of sequence because there's the chassis extension again. And here's the other part of the Intergy cross member, and these are link rod hangers for the rear axle. And this photo is what I call an image of the 6x6 factory. In the rear here is my F100 6x6 chassis, and you can see it's using one of those Intergy components there to hang the link rods for the rear axle. In the middle here is my Commanche MJ 6x6 chassis, and here you can clearly see a drive shaft going into the centre axle, and you can see a pinion on the rear, and a short drive shaft here connects it to the rear axle here. And this is what I've got so far in the new build, and here's the Intergy component put together. The beauty of this is that not only does it hang your link rods for the rear axle, but it clamps together very securely your chassis extension and your original part of the chassis. It does it way better than the pieces that come with the chassis extension kit. But it's not cheap. Here we see the front transfer case mounted as per usual. It's sitting on what would normally be maybe an engine center plate, but because I'm using a front mount transmission, the same as I've got here in the Commanche MJ, then the transfer case is back here, and the motor is mounted up the front. Here you can see another centre plate or cross member for the second transfer case, and here I've inverted it for the purposes of later putting a tray or some body on the back of this vehicle. I just mocked this up to see if it gave me a lower profile, and it does quite a bit. Here's another shot, bit further advanced. We've got link rods, axles secured, shocks, shock towers, a shorty drive shaft between the transmission and the transfer case, and then we've got drive shaft to the second transfer case, and it's it shows you a bit better how I've underhung the transfer case to hopefully provide a bit more clearance there for maybe a body going on the vehicle later on. Another image from a different angle, but the same build stage. And we're at the same stage, and just another angle shows you a bit more about the link rods set up there. This is the front rod ends for the rear axle link rods, and you can see that they've fastened into this energy component here, there, and the outer ones go to an inner mount there. These are the inner ones, inner, as in on the axle housing. They're mounted in the upper, more central mounts there. Here's a side view of the energy component, and here you can see the upper link rods mounted into there and the lower ones mounted into there. And you can see this link rod I've fabbed up out of threaded rods. You can see other link rods here are different, and these are, I think they're just standard axial link rods that I had in a box. What I normally do is just, for initial mock-up particularly, I'll normally just pinch what link rods I've got that do the job, and then I'll later swap them out for my own, particularly if the ones I'm using for mock-up aren't exactly the correct length that I require. Now we get back to here, this image, and this is where the whole thing takes a turn, because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, now here's a 6x6 chassis, and here's another 6x6 chassis, and do I need another 6x6 chassis here? And I get the idea that maybe I just go 8x8, so you can see I've got 3 rear axles here. Here's the front, that's the second axle, the third axle, and the fourth one. And I started out from this point with a steer axle on the rear. I thought that'd be the way to go. Here you can see the chassis rails clamped together. Here's my F100, and it uses the same energy part in there, and it's got to come out because during the mock-up of the 8x8 chassis I need another one of these, and at this point in time I didn't want to buy one, so I just ripped this one out of here. Here it is on the floor here. here's actually a piece of chassis that I'm going to cut up and further extend the chassis rails for this build. So I situate the axle where I think it should be. Then I marked up how much more chassis rail I required and cut it off these. Quite a bit further down the track, from here at the motor to here on the third axle is about where the 6x6 build got to. And then you can see the energy component here from the F100, the chassis rail extensions here, and the fourth axle, the fourth steer axle in there. I started with a steer axle on the back, but during some real roughy testing I decided it probably wasn't worth it. So when the 8x8 first got to a rolling chassis, it didn't have any rear steer assist, and it performed quite well, except that the turning circle left a lot to be desired. In the back there you can see my F100 chassis minus components, temporarily of course. Here's the F100 chassis that I had to put back together, and I used some other link rod hangers here, and I made a different arrangement for the bottom ones, and it just needs a tidy up and a touch up with paint and it should be good. So here's the 8x8, another shot. Here you can see I'm setting the transfer cases. I've reverted them to how they might quote normally unquote be on top of the center plates or cross members, that one there and this one here. Got the two energy components in there clamping the chassis rails together and providing the hangers for the link rods. I've got shock absorbers on here. All the drive shaft angles at this stage are a bit acute, but that's just some fine tuning to be done down the road. Also at this stage I needed more wheels, so I opted for some cheaper ones, but I also wanted some wheels that were a bit simple, a bit minimalist. I'm sort of, for this vehicle, thinking at this point in time anyway that I might go something like a heavy duty haulage type, military type build, so I want something that might suit that look down the road, and these seem to fit the bill. So here's a top down, here's the second transfer case here, and here's the third one, and this yellow line indicates the path of travel of the final drive shaft. I need the body, and I decided that Proline Dodge bodies of this style were a bit dear, so I went and had a look around. I found this RGT brand Crusher model body, which is really a replica of the Dodge Power Wagon. I bought the whole kit and kept the body and sold the rest. I've got the smaller accessories like the air filter and exhaust. I kept those. I want those for this build. I got onto RGT's website, but they didn't have these as spare parts. So I went to FTX, which is they're both the same. Apparently they both come out of the same factory, though. In the case of the RGT Crusher, FTX make the identical thing, and it's called a FTX Texan. But they provided a spare set of exhaust and air filter, etc. The only thing is they're the same side of the body as the ones I've already got. I want them as a pair on either side, so I'll need to maybe cut somewhere along this pipe and spin it around, turn it 180 or something, and get it to suit the other side, but that's alright, we can do that. At this point in time, I've also decided that I'm going to go for cantilever shocks, and I bought 3 of these sets for the rear 3 axles, and the idea here again is about keeping down the profile of the rear chassis for what I think now is going to be something like a tray body on the back of the truck. And here it is, just getting a bit of a quick run just out the back. And here I'm a bit interested in how much suspension travel I'm getting with a longer vehicle. I had the idea that it's fairly important to get a bit of suspension travel when you've got so many axles. You want to keep most of the wheels in contact with the ground as much as possible. Otherwise, why have that many wheels? But it was sort of okay, but not what I'd hoped. I'm using the upright telescopic shocks here. You can see the front axle's planted and the second axle here is planted. This one's not, and the difference in the terrain, so to speak, from this point to that point is not that much that I thought that this wheel would hang, but it did, and the same with this back one. But we'll have a look at that as we go on. Now here again you can see that this axle here is not really well planted. This one here is, and this one is, and this one's not bad. But by this stage of sort of testing this configuration of the chassis, I'm getting the idea that whilst it would be really good to have these wheels, most of them in contact with the ground most of the time on rough terrain, it may be a long chassis, a multi-axle thing, that's not making that possible, or possible to the extent I thought I might achieve earlier on. I've watched quite a lot of videos now, YouTube's on 8x8 chassis and similar, and more chassis for radio control vehicles, and there's not a lot of custom build chassis out there, and most of the kit or RTRs, I suspect, wouldn't be blessed with a lot of suspension travel out of the box anyway, so I was trying to gauge what they were doing, and also, and in particular, what custom builds were doing, what people were doing to achieve what I was hoping to do. But it looks like, for the most part, the more axles you get, you're going to see, I'm not saying you're going to see less or less contact of wheels on the ground. You couldn't, but it's going to appear that for the number of wheels you've got not what you anticipate in terms of ground contact. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, you expect these things to get along a bit like a caterpillar, and they don't necessarily do that. And I'm thinking now that length of the chassis, the number of axles, is a big factor in that. This one looks a lot better, but it is the same test. It's the same chassis. Now the cantilevers arrived, so I've installed those. These images give you a look at that. They also give you a bit better a look at the transfer cases sitting up on the chassis plates and the height above the chassis rails that is involved there, and why I was hoping to reduce that with them inverted. But the inversion of these, particularly with the centre axle, reduced the travel on that axle a bit, not a heck of a lot. It was only a few mils really before the upright shocks maxed out on compression. A couple of more mils and they would have maxed out before the axle collided with the transfer case. But I thought just that couple of mils might be handy in terms of wheel travel, and it's better that I do something with the top of the chassis. Here's another look, and this one's taken prior to the other one, I think, where they were inverted. You can see that there's way less sticking above the chassis rails here, but I conceded that it was probably not the best way to go in terms of wheel travel. Just another image. You can see in this image that the rearmost mount of this shock absorber shares a pre-existing hole in the Energy rod hanger chassis clamp component, and the same at the back here. So it was good in that it just sort of fell together like that quite easily. No real dramas. You can see here I've clocked the portal boxes on the rear axles here such that I've improved the pinion angles on the drive shafts. Here's a couple of top downs, and they just show the transfer cases inverted and the transfer cases in the quote normal unquote position. And I actually took these images before disassembling everything, so that when I put it back together and those transfer cases were flipped over and turned around, I'd know exactly which way drive shafts went. I could have figured it out, but with an image you don't have to think about it, do you? You just put it back together how you see in the image. Now this is a further advancement, because I did have for a while, as I said earlier, initially I started the project with rear steer on the rear axle only. Then I removed that and put a solid axle as the fourth axle and ran that for a little bit of testing. Then I pulled that assembly apart and decided to go for rear steer on the third and the fourth axle. So here I've got servo on axle on both the fourth and the third axle. This again made it compulsory almost that I situate the transfer cases above the chassis rails like this, because the transfer case and the servo on the axle just weren't going to work together. I've got pretty good clearance, and I've got pretty good. Whoops, sorry, this is on this axle here. I've got pretty good wheel travel on that axle now. Here we are with the car out in the testing with the cantilevers and the two rear steer assist axles, and comparing to the Commanche MJ. This 8x8 is turning around on a dime. It's just unbelievable how smaller turning circle it uses. It's initially quite twisty when you, or twitchy when you get to steer it, and you've just got to adjust to that. Oversteering was a common thing in the early stage of driving it. I've also got both the rear servos on the same channel as the front one. So as the front turns, both the rear turn, and I haven't used a separate channel or channels for them, and I don't intend to. I just didn't want to go with the extra involvement there of another receiver that I'd require, because I've only got a 3-channel on this, and the extra handling of the controller when you're driving it. Here's a video I took when I first got it working with the two rear steer axles. Don't worry about the alignment, that gets done later, but it was very pleasing to see this. Very pleasing. Here shows you from top down where the servos are sitting, and this servo on the third axle is now not really interfering with suspension travel. The cantilevers are maxing out on compression before the servo collides with anything underneath. At this point here, between the servo horn on that servo and the energy component here, I call it an energy component because I don't know really what else to call it in a simple term. But yeah, there was a clearance issue there. You can see it's tight now, but I got the Dremel into it and opened it up a bit. Here I'm running the metal rims on the axles on a straight edge up the top to have a look at what's happening in terms of alignment down here. Just a quick look to tell me where it's at and what I've got to do with steering arms and tie rods. You can see this one's towed in a bit on the fourth axle. This one's towed out a bit on the third axle. This one appears to be offsetting the chassis a bit, but it's not. It's standing off that straight edge up there just the same. It's simply that these rear axles are a little bit narrower than the front axles. This is work I did to change back in the telescopic shocks and take the vehicle out again and test over the same ground I'd run the cantilevers, because I thought the cantilevers were restricting wheel travel. And that's why I said early in the video that the image I had of the F100 was relevant to what considerations I made with this current build later down the track, and that's that this wheel travel I can see here over rough terrain is adequate in terms of how I drive and how I use the vehicle, and it's by virtue of cantilever shock absorbers. Not saying that they're better, but I'm saying they're providing adequate wheel travel here in this scenario. And it was always a question why, when I first put them on the 8x8 chassis, why I wasn't seeing the same. It also strengthened the idea in my mind that maybe it's the excessive length of the chassis and the extra axle that's a fair sort of factor in determining the amount of wheel travel you'll have on these sorts of vehicles. I'm not an expert in that, and I don't know, but I just said to myself, well, if I can get that wheel travel on my F100, why can't I get it on the 8x8? The cantilever shock absorbers, as they're set up here, was mimicked on the 8x8 so that I had an idea what sort of effect they were having in the suspension travel. We're back with that one, but I'm not sure why. Anyway, this would be where I'm putting the cantilevers back, having decided that the telescopic shocks, or the upright shock absorbers, actually didn't improve the situation any, and I might as well go back to cantilevers and work with them. So that's it, really. That's where the build's at. We've got to here, we've tested it, it's driving okay. It's simply a matter of maybe trying to have a look at suspension travel on the rear axles. I think to get it out into some of the other terrain, I have had the F100 in and see how this performs over the same ground. Will give me more info to work with. I've got the body to do, and I've got some other things like steering arms and tie rods and some things to be done like that, but it's nothing big. It's nearly all there, so we'll call it that. If you've got all the way through, thanks very much. Leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed it, and that's it. Bye.